Captain Amanda Foster stood at the Galactic Council's presentation podium, her crisp blue Space Force uniform a stark contrast against the flowing robes and bioluminescent attire of the alien delegates. The holographic display behind her showed what appeared to be, in the words of one particularly vocal critic, a primitive battering ram with engines attached. The Hyperion-class deep space vessel represents humanity's latest advancement in space warfare technology, Foster declared, her voice steady despite the barely concealed snickers from the Mirandian delegation. The ship's design was unconventional by galactic standards. No sleek energy projectors, no quantum phase arrays, just layers upon layers of what appeared to be traditional armor plating. Councillor Xithtal, his crystalline form refracting light across the chamber, raised what passed for an appendage. Captain Foster, while we appreciate Earth's enthusiasm for joining the galactic community, surely you must realize this design violates several basic principles of modern space combat. Foster maintained her diplomatic smile, though her knuckles whitened slightly on the podium's edge. Would you care to elaborate, Counselor? Gladly. Xithtal's crystalline surface rippled with what the gathered delegates recognized as amusement. Your vessel appears to rely on physical armor in an age of energy weapons. You've dedicated 60% of your mass to what appears to be reinforced plating, when any basic plasma cannon could simply burn through it. The design is, forgive my bluntness, laughably outdated. The chamber filled with murmurs of agreement. Foster clicked to the next slide, showing the Hyperion's internal structure. We believe there's still value in certain traditional approaches. Traditional. The Mirandian ambassador cut in, her tentacles writhing in what humans had learned was their equivalent of eye-rolling. Captain, my species was splitting atoms when your kind was still discovering how to make bronze. The very notion that you could contribute meaningful military innovation is... Ambassador, Foster interrupted, her smile never wavering. With all due respect, humanity's brief history has taught us one thing. There's often elegance in simplicity. Back on the Hyperion, docked discreetly at the Council's orbital station, Lieutenant Commander Jack Reynolds watched the broadcast with the rest of the senior staff. They really have no idea, do they? He mused, glancing at Chief Engineer Mike Davidson. Davidson looked up from his diagnostic panel, where simulated stress tests painted the screen in a cascade of green indicators. That's the point, isn't it? Let them think we're the primitive newcomers. Makes what comes next all the more effective. Dr. Emily Brooks, their theoretical physicist, absently traced equations in the air with her augmented reality interface. The math doesn't lie. When they finally see what this ship can do. She trailed off, her eyes distant as she ran through the calculations again. The broadcast continued as Foster fielded increasingly condescending questions. Each criticism was met with the same measured response. Polite acknowledgement followed by vague references to alternative approaches to cosmic mechanics. Security Officer James Martinez switched off the feed. Enough of this circus. We've got drills to run. He turned to the gathered crew. Remember, people, what we're practicing isn't in any standard combat manual. Keep it quiet. Keep it clean. As the crew dispersed to their stations, Reynolds lingered, staring at the now dark screen. The Council's dismissal of their ship didn't bother him. What bothered him was knowing why they'd built it in the first place. Intelligence reports suggested something was coming, something that all the advanced energy weapons in the galaxy couldn't stop. Foster's presentation concluded with polite, if dismissive, applause. As she gathered her materials, Counselor Xithtal approached. Captain, one last question, if I may. Why name such a basic vessel after a mythological titan? Foster's smile finally reached her eyes. Sometimes, Counselor, the old myths have a way of teaching us new tricks. Though I should correct you, Hyperion isn't named after the titan. It's named after the physics principle that inspired its design. She left the confused Counselor behind, making her way back to her ship. Let them laugh, she thought. Let them dismiss humanity as primitives playing with toys they didn't understand. In the simulator, Her crew was practicing maneuvers that would make those same critics question everything they thought they knew about space warfare. The Hyperion waited in its berth, its thick armor gleaming dully under the station's lights. To the casual observer, it looked exactly like what they accused it of being, an oversized battering ram with engines. None of them had asked the crucial question. In an age of energy weapons and shields, why would humanity build something designed to take hits rather than avoid them? They'd learn the answer soon enough. Lieutenant Commander Jack Reynolds felt his heart stop as the emergency transmission cut through the bridge's usual quiet hum. New Eden, humanity's largest off-world colony with over 3 million souls, had gone silent. The long-range sensors painted a grim picture. A fleet of unknown vessels had dropped out of hyperspace, their energy signatures unlike anything in the Galactic Council's database. Multiple impacts detected on New Eden's surface. Communications Officer Lisa Thompson reported, her voice tight. Colony defense grid is. It's not even slowing them down. Their shields are absorbing everything we throw at them. Captain Foster strode onto the bridge, her face set in stone. Show me. The main display flickered to life, showing New Eden's orbital space. The attacking ships moved with terrible purpose, their dark hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. Each vessel released precise energy pulses that bypassed the colony's most advanced defensive screens as if they weren't there. Galactic Council response? Foster asked, though she already knew the answer. The Mirandian Defense Fleet attempted to intervene, Thompson replied. Their weapons had no effect. The Vraxan shields. She swallowed hard. They're unlike anything we've seen. Reynolds watched as the Mirandian ships, pride of the Council's combined fleet, retreated in disarray. Their most powerful energy weapons dissipated harmlessly against the Vraxan shields, while return fire cut through their own defenses like paper. Sir, Martinez called from his security station. We're receiving a message from Admiral Hayes. Foster nodded. Put him through. Admiral Thomas Hayes' hologram appeared on the bridge, his expression grim. Amanda, it's time. We've lost contact with 3 more colonies in the past hour. The Council's weapons are useless against their shields, and we're picking up Vraxan fleet movements toward Earth itself. Understanding, sir. Foster's voice was steady, but Reynolds could see her hands clench behind her back. Permission to execute Operation Newton. Granted, the Hyperion is authorized to demonstrate its full capabilities. Show them why we built it. As the transmission ended, Foster turned to her crew. This is what we trained for. Engineering. Davidson's voice came through clear. Fusion core at full capacity. Inertial dampeners are primed and loading the acceleration equations Dr. Brooks designed. Navigation. Course plotted, O'Brien replied from his station. I've identified their command vessel. Time to impact at maximum acceleration will be 17 minutes. Foster took her command chair, activating the neural interface that would help her crew survive what came next. Lieutenant Commander Reynolds, initiate combat protocols. Dr. Brooks, begin mass calculations. Reynolds felt the familiar tingle as the neural interface connected, linking the crew's reactions to the ship's systems. The Hyperion's true purpose was about to be revealed, not as a warship, but as the largest kinetic weapon humanity had ever created. Vraxan fleet is launching another attack run on the colony, Thompson reported. They're broadcasting on all frequencies. A harsh, metallic voice filled the bridge. Your defensive capabilities are insufficient. Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Surrender your worlds and submit to Vraxan authority. Foster's response was to open a channel to all Earth forces in the system. This is Captain Foster of the Hyperion. All vessels clear a straight line path between our position and the Vraxan command ship. What you're about to see is classified under Section 9 protocols. She turned to Reynolds. Start the clock, XO. Let's show them why we built a ship that doesn't need to avoid being hit. The Hyperion's engines flared to life, building power in a way that made the Council's sensors scream with confusion. This wasn't the slow acceleration of a normal ship. This was something else entirely. Mass calculations complete, Brooks announced. At our projected velocity, we'll hit with the force of a small nuclear device. Their shields are designed to deflect energy. But they can't deflect mass. Foster finished. Not at these speeds. Mr. O'Brien, take us in. Let's remind the galaxy that sometimes the old ways still work best. The Hyperion began its run, accelerating at rates that would have killed an unaugmented crew. As they watched New Eden grow larger on their screens, Reynolds thought about all the critics who had laughed at their primitive design. They weren't laughing anymore. The Vraxan command ship hung in space like a dark star, its supposedly impenetrable shields rippling with violet energy. On the Hyperion's bridge, Chief Engineer Mike Davidson watched his readouts with fierce intensity as the ship's revolutionary fusion core pushed them to speeds that made Einstein's equations more than just theory. 0.15 light speed, he announced, his voice strained against the inertial forces even their dampeners couldn't fully negate. Hull integrity holding at 97%. Captain Foster's voice cut through the low rumble of their acceleration. Distance to target. 50,000 kilometers and closing fast, O'Brien reported from navigation, his fingers dancing across holographic controls. They're finally starting to react to our approach. The Vraxan fleet's response came moments later. Energy weapons lashed out, their beams concentrated on the approaching human vessel. The aliens had obviously expected their attack to slice through the Hyperion's primitive armor. Instead, the beams scattered off the specialized plating, dissipating into space. "They're hailing us," Thompson called out, a note of grim satisfaction in her voice. "Their commander sounds confused." "Put them through," Foster ordered. The metallic voice of the Vraxan commander filled the bridge, but this time the arrogance had been replaced by something approaching concern. "Human vessel, your suicide run is futile. Our shields have withstood impacts from stellar debris. Your destruction will serve no purpose." Dr. Brooks smiled at her station, still monitoring the physics at play. "They really don't understand, do they?" She keyed her mic. "Captain, we're about to give them a lesson in basic Newtonian physics they'll never forget." Foster opened a channel to the Vraxan ship. "You're right about one thing. Your shields are impressive. They're perfect for handling energy weapons, radiation, even small debris. But let me ask you something. When was the last time someone hit you with 20 million tons of mass accelerated to 15% of light speed?" The silence that followed was deafening. Energy shields work by detecting and deflecting various forms of energy, Brooks explained to her crewmates, even as the distance closed. But they can't deflect momentum. Force equals mass times acceleration. And we got plenty of both. Reynolds watched as the Vraxan ships began to break formation, finally understanding the threat. "They're trying to move their command ship." "Too late," O'Brien said with professional satisfaction. "Impact in 10 seconds. Foster's voice remained steady. "All hands, brace for contact. Dr. Brooks, your calculations better be right about our armor holding together." "The math doesn't lie, Captain. Though I admit, this will be one hell of a field test." The final seconds ticked down as the Hyperion's true purpose became clear to everyone watching. It wasn't just a ship, it was a bullet, designed to punch through the one thing every advanced race had come to rely on: energy shielding. Impact. The Hyperion struck the Vraxan shield at a velocity that turned basic physics into a weapon of mass destruction. The shield, designed to deflect energy, had absolutely no defense against pure kinetic force. It shattered like glass. The reinforced bow of the Hyperion, built with materials and techniques that had made the Council laugh, plowed through the alien vessel's hull as if it were paper. The momentum of 20 million tons moving at relativistic speed transferred into the Vraxan ship with devastating effect. Inside the Hyperion, the crew endured forces that would have turned unprotected humans to paste. Their neural interfaces and inertial dampeners, hidden beneath the primitive armor, proved their worth as the ship burst through the other side of the Vraxan command vessel. "Status," Foster called out, as they emerged from the debris field. Davidson checked his readings. Hull integrity at 89%. All systems functional. The fusion core's ready for another run if we need it. On their screens, the Vraxin command ship split perfectly in half, secondary explosions blossoming along its length. The remaining alien vessels froze in space, their commanders trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Broadcasting on all frequencies, Thompson announced. The remaining Vraxin ships are receiving a transmission from their homeworld. They're ordering a full retreat. Foster allowed herself a small smile. Send a message to Admiral Hayes. Tell him the Hyperion performed exactly as designed. Also inform the Galactic Council that humanity would be happy to explain the basics of Newtonian physics to them at their convenience. As the Vraxin fleet fled in disarray, Reynolds turned to his captain. Think they'll still call us primitives after this? Probably, Foster replied. But they'll do it with a lot more respect. Dr. Emily Brooks stood before the hastily convened Galactic Council, surrounded by holographic displays showing the Hyperion's internal schematics. The chamber, which had once echoed with laughter at humanity's primitive design, now sat in stunned silence. The principle is actually quite simple, Brooks explained, highlighting the ship's reinforced frame. While you were perfecting energy weapons, we took a different approach. Why try to penetrate advanced shields when basic physics already provides the answer? Counselor Xithtol's crystalline form shimmered with agitation. But the forces involved. The crew should have been reduced to their base atomic components. Brooks smiled, zooming in on what appeared to be standard armor plating. That's where our primitive design proves its worth. Each layer serves multiple purposes. She tapped the display, causing it to explode into detailed subsections. The outer hull isn't just armor. It's a complex matrix of quantum-stabilized materials designed to maintain structural integrity at relativistic speeds. The Mirandian ambassador leaned forward, her tentacles writhing with intense interest. And your crew? Even with such armor, the acceleration should have been fatal. That's the true brilliance of Captain Foster's design team, Brooks replied, bringing up the neural interface schematics. We didn't try to completely negate the forces, we worked with them. The neural interfaces allow our crew to function as one with the ship's systems. When we accelerate, the ship compensates for our biological limitations. Chief Engineer Davidson, standing at the back of the chamber, stepped forward. The fusion core isn't just an engine, he added. It's the heart of the most advanced inertial dampening system ever created. We just hid it behind what looked like excessive armor plating. The council chamber erupted in excited discussion. Species that had dismissed humanity as upstart primitives were now frantically taking notes, their own military experts huddling in corners to whisper about implications. Security Officer Martinez watched from his position near the door, noting how quickly mockery had turned to fear and respect. The Hyperion had changed everything, not just through its success, but by proving that sometimes the simplest solution was the most elegant. There's one thing I don't understand, a Centaurian delegate called out. Why reveal this technology now? Surely keeping it secret would have provided tactical advantages. Captain Foster stepped up to the podium, her presence commanding immediate attention. Because the Vraxin aren't the only threat out there, she stated firmly. We developed the Hyperion not just as a weapon, but as a proof of concept. Energy shields have become a crutch, making us forget that there's more than one way to solve a problem. Brooks nodded, switching the display to show the aftermath of their first engagement. The Vraxin shields were perfect at stopping energy weapons, but they never considered that someone would be, in their words, primitive enough to simply ram them at near-light speed. The complexity is in making it work, Davidson added. Any species could build a kinetic weapon. Building one that survives the impact and can do it again. That took every advancement we could muster, hidden beneath layers of what you all dismissed as outdated technology. Lieutenant Commander Reynolds, watching from his seat, couldn't help but smile as the council members who had once sneered at human engineering now clamored for details. The Hyperion had done more than prove a point. It had forced the galaxy's most advanced species to reconsider their assumptions about progress. "We're not here to replace energy weapons or shields," Foster concluded, her voice carrying across the chamber. "We're here to remind everyone that innovation doesn't always mean complexity. Sometimes it means looking at old problems in new ways." As the session ended, Brooks found herself surrounded by alien scientists, each eager to understand the principles behind what they had dismissed as primitive. She caught Foster's eye across the room, sharing a knowing look. They had known this would happen once the galaxy saw past its preconceptions about human technology. "Dr. Brooks." Shithtal approached, his crystalline form somehow managing to look humbled. "I believe I owe humanity an apology. We mistook simplicity for primitive thinking. In doing so, we almost missed one of the most elegant solutions to combat physics I have ever encountered." Brooks smiled, pulling up one final display, the simple equation that had started it all. "Sometimes, counselor, the most advanced solution is remembering the basics. Equals ma. The rest is just details." Security Officer James Martinez stood in the Hyperion's observation deck, watching the debris field that had once been a Vraxan heavy cruiser slowly drift apart in the void. The ship's last moments replayed in his mind. The shield failure, the instantaneous devastation as 20 million tons of human ingenuity tore through its hull at relativistic speed. "Troubled?" Dr. Brooks asked, joining him at the viewport. She had dark circles under her eyes, fresh from another round of explanations to the Galactic Council's Ethics Committee. "Did you see the sensor logs from the last impact?" Martins asked, his voice quiet. Their crew had no chance. No time to evacuate, no time to even realize what was happening. One moment they existed, the next. He gestured at the scattered debris. The ship's mess hall had become an unofficial forum for these discussions. Captain Foster encouraged it, understanding that her crew needed to process the psychological impact of their actions. Today's debate had drawn most of the off-duty personnel, including Lieutenant Commander Reynolds. "We're not just killing them," Navigator O'Brien argued, pushing his cold coffee aside. "We're obliterating them. There's something different about this compared to conventional combat." "Different how?" Thompson challenged from across the table. "Is it more ethical to vaporize them with plasma weapons? To suffocate them with shield failures? Dead is dead." Reynolds raised his hand, silencing the growing argument. "The real question isn't about how we're killing them. It's about whether we had any other choice." The mess hall grew quiet as Foster entered, carrying her own tray. The captain had made it a point to eat with her crew, especially during these difficult conversations. "The Ethics Committee asked me something interesting today," she said, sitting down. "They wanted to know if we considered our weapon humane by human standards." Davidson snorted from his corner. Did they forget that the Vraxan were about to glass New Eden? 3 million colonists would have died if we hadn't stopped them. "That's just it," Martinez interjected. "We're not just stopping them. We're introducing a whole new level of warfare." The galaxy relied on energy weapons and shields because they offered some chance of survival. Shields could be reinforced, hulls could be repaired. But this, he gestured toward the viewport. There's no defense against physics. Brooks pulled up a holographic display of their last engagement. "Actually, there is. Don't move. Don't attack innocent colonies. The Hyperion isn't designed for conventional combat. It's a deterrent. The message isn't that we can kill them. It's that if they force our hand, there will be consequences they can't shield against." Foster nodded. "The Galactic Council is already drafting new treaties specifically addressing kinetic weapons at relativistic speeds. We've changed the rules of warfare, but maybe that's not a bad thing." "How so?" Reynolds asked, genuinely curious. "Because for the first time in galactic history, the most powerful weapons can't be used for surgical strikes or limited engagements," Foster explained. "You can't just disable a ship with the Hyperion. It's all or nothing. That makes everyone think twice about starting a fight." Thompson's console beeped, interrupting the discussion. "Captain, we're receiving reports. 3 Vraxan battle groups have withdrawn from their occupied territories. They're requesting diplomatic channels through the Council." Martinez turned back to the viewport, watching the last traces of debris disappear into the darkness. "So that's our legacy. Peace through the ultimate deterrent." "Our legacy," Foster said firmly, "is reminding the galaxy that actions have consequences. The Vraxan believed their shields made them invincible, that they could attack without repercussion. We proved them wrong, not with superior technology, but with basic physics they'd chosen to ignore." The debate continued well into the next shift, but something had changed. The crew began to see their ship not as a weapon of mass destruction, but as a shield protecting humanity through the threat of unshieldable consequences. As Martinez finally headed to his quarters, he passed the ship's primary hull where maintenance crews were repairing impact damage. The massive plates of armor, once mocked as primitive, now seemed to hold a different kind of power, not just the power to destroy, but the power to prevent destruction through its very existence. "Sometimes," he muttered, echoing Brooks's words to the Council, "the simplest solution is the most effective deterrent." The Hyperion's engines hummed softly in response, ready for whatever the galaxy might throw at them next. Lisa Thompson's hands froze over her communications console as the Vraxan transmission ended. The bridge of the Hyperion fell into a silence so deep she could hear the subtle hum of the neural interface nodes in her headrest. "Play it again," Captain Foster ordered, her face illuminated by the tactical displays showing Vraxan fleet movements near the Centauri colonies. The metallic voice filled the bridge once more. "Your kinetic weapon has earned our respect, humans, but respect breeds adaptation. You have 6 Earth hours to surrender the Hyperion, or we will demonstrate our own understanding of physics. The star you call Proxima Centauri will serve as our example." Dr. Brooks burst onto the bridge, her augmented reality interface projecting equations as she moved. "Captain, I've analyzed the energy readings from their new vessel. They'd built something that could theoretically compress a star's core to the point of artificial supernova." "Theoretically?" Reynolds asked, hoping for some doubt. "The math is solid," Brooks replied, her voice tight. "They're not bluffing." Foster turned to O'Brien at navigation. "How long to reach Proxima Centauri at maximum speed?" 7 hours, 12 minutes, he answered, already plotting the course. "We can't get there in time." Davidson's voice crackled over the intercom from engineering. "Captain, I might have a way to boost our speed, but—" He hesitated. "It would mean redlining the fusion core beyond safety parameters. Way beyond." "How far beyond?" Foster asked. "The kind of beyond where we'd better hit something at the end, because the core wouldn't survive a second run." Martinez pulled up the tactical overlay. "The Vraxan superweapon is stationed here." He highlighted a position near Proxima Centauri. "They're keeping it just outside our maximum range. They learned from our first engagement." Foster stood, walking to the main viewport. 6 hours to decide between surrendering humanity's only effective weapon against the Vraxan or watching a star die, along with the 12 million colonists in its system. "Dr. Brooks," she turned to her physicist, "if Davidson pushes the core past safety limits, what kind of impact velocity could we achieve?" Brooks's fingers flew through the holographic calculations. "Theoretically, 0.25 light speed. But the stresses on the hull would be. Would we survive long enough to hit them?" Brooks met her captain's eyes. "Maybe. The neural interfaces would be operating beyond their design specs. We might not be conscious for the impact. But the ship's momentum would continue even if we're unconscious," Reynolds noted, understanding where Foster was going with this. Thompson's console lit up again. "Captain, Admiral Hayes is hailing us." The Admiral's hologram appeared, looking older than they'd ever seen him. "Amanda, we've evacuated as many colonists as we can, but we'll never get them all out in time. The Council is advising surrender." Foster straightened. "Sir, request permission for one final mission. We have a plan, but—" She glanced at her crew, seeing the understanding in their eyes. It's one way. Hayes was silent for a long moment. The Hyperion is your ship, Captain. Whatever you decide, Earth stands with you. After the transmission ended, Foster addressed her crew. I won't order this. If anyone wants to evacuate before we commit, now's the time. No one moved. Davidson's voice came over the intercom again. Core modifications are ready, Captain. Just say the word. Foster looked at each of her bridge crew in turn. Thompson at communications, her hand steady on her console. Martinez at security, nodding grimly. Brooks still running calculations, but her face set with determination. O'Brien at navigation, already plotting their final course. Reynolds at her side, waiting for the order they all knew was coming. Send a message to the Vraxen, Foster commanded. Tell them the Hyperion is on her way. Let's show them what happens when they push humanity into a corner. Thompson smiled as she transmitted. Message sent. Their response is confusion. They know we can't reach them in time. They're about to learn another lesson in physics, Brooks said, finalizing her calculations. Sometimes the fastest path isn't the expected one. Foster took her command chair one last time. All hands, this is the captain. Secure for maximum acceleration. Engineering, redline the core. Navigation, take us in. The Hyperion's engines flared brighter than ever before as they began their final run. In the observation deck, the stars themselves appeared to stretch as relativistic speeds turned physics itself into humanity's last desperate weapon. The Hyperion's hull groaned under forces it was never meant to endure. In engineering, Chief Davidson watched his beloved fusion core burn far into the red, pushing the ship faster than any human vessel had ever traveled. Core temperature critical, he reported, his voice strained against the growing G-forces. 3 minutes until total containment failure. On the bridge, Captain Foster watched through blurring vision as their velocity climbed. The neural interfaces were barely managing to keep them conscious, their enhanced bodies fighting against physics itself. 0.2 light speed, O'Brien called out, his words slurring slightly. 0.22, 0.23. Dr. Brooks fought to keep her eyes focused on the readouts. Hull integrity at 40% and falling. The armors ablating just from the friction of interstellar hydrogen at these speeds. Time to target, Foster managed to ask. 4 minutes, Reynolds responded, blood trickling from his nose despite the neural interface's best efforts. The Vraxen still don't realize we found a way to reach them in time. Thompson's fingers trembled as she maintained their communications. They've spotted us. They're bringing their superweapon online. Energy readings from Proxima Centauri are starting to spike. Foster keyed the ship-wide comm. All hands, this is your captain. The Hyperion was built to protect humanity, and that's exactly what we're going to do. It's been an honor. The responses came back garbled but clear in their intent, every crew member acknowledging their final mission. 0.24 light speed, O'Brien announced. Maximum velocity achieved. Impact in 3 minutes. Davidson's voice crackled over the comm. Captain, core containment is failing. We'll have an antimatter cascade in 2 minutes. Perfect timing, Brooks whispered, her calculations still running. The core breach combined with our kinetic energy at impact. The explosion will rival a small supernova. Martinez managed a pained laugh from his station. Ironic. They threatened to blow up a star. Instead, we're bringing them their own personal sun. The Vraxen superweapon grew larger on their main viewer, its dark hull seeming to swallow the light from nearby Proxima Centauri. Their transmission cut through the ship's speakers, no longer sounding confident. Human vessel, your speed is impossible. You cannot maintain structural integrity at such velocity. Stand down or be destroyed. Foster tried to smile through the crushing G-forces. Thompson, send our reply. Channel open. This is Captain Amanda Foster of the Hyperion. You threatened our colonies. You thought we wouldn't find a way to reach you in time. But you forgot something important about humans. We don't accept no-win scenarios. The Vraxen response was immediate. Your ship will be destroyed before impact. Our shields won't help you, Foster interrupted. You're about to learn the last lesson the Hyperion has to teach. Sometimes victory requires sacrifice. 1 minute to impact. The bridge crew fought to stay conscious as warning alerts screamed from every console. The hull was coming apart, the fusion core was breaching, and the neural interfaces were failing. Engineering to bridge. Davidson's voice was barely audible now. Core containment at critical. She's going to blow whether we hit them or not. 30 seconds, O'Brien called out. Course is locked. Even if we black out, momentum will do the rest. Brooks's last readings flashed across her screen. Impact velocity holding at 0.24 light speed. The kinetic energy combined with the core breach will be. Her voice trailed off as the neural interface finally failed. For Earth, Foster whispered, watching the Vraxen vessel fill their failing view screen. For all of us. The last thing the crew saw was the look of determination on each other's faces as the neural interfaces shut down and consciousness faded. But they knew it didn't matter anymore. The Hyperion had become more than a ship. It was now a 20-million-ton bullet traveling at nearly a quarter of light speed, its failing containment core about to add its own apocalyptic power to the impact. The Vraxen superweapon never had time to fire. Their perfect shields, designed to stop energy weapons, meant nothing against the laws of physics. The Hyperion struck with the force of a small sun, its dying core breaching at the exact moment of impact. The flash was visible across 3 star systems, and in its light, humanity's message was clear. Never mistake our willingness to talk for an inability to act. Never mistake our preference for peace as a fear of war. And never, ever threaten our people. 1 year later, Admiral Thomas Hayes stood before the Galactic Council, his dress uniform adorned with the newly created Hyperion Cross, a medal struck from the last remaining piece of the legendary ship's hull. The chamber, once filled with mockery of human engineering, now held a reverent silence. Today, we honor not just courage, but innovation, Hayes began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber. The crew of the Hyperion taught us all that advancement doesn't always mean complexity. Sometimes it means remembering the fundamentals. In the front row, Lieutenant Commander Reynolds and Security Officer Martinez sat in their formal uniforms, each bearing the weight of survival. They were the only senior officers who hadn't been aboard for the final mission, having been ordered to transfer critical data hours before the Hyperion's last run. The Foster Doctrine, Hayes continued, has been adopted by 47 species. Its principle is simple. The most advanced weapon is useless if you forget the basics of physics. The Hyperion sacrifice proved that shields cannot stop momentum, and that determination cannot be measured by technology alone. The Mirandian ambassador, who had once dismissed human engineering as primitive, rose to speak. We propose that the coordinates of the Hyperion's final impact be designated as a memorial site. Let it stand as a reminder that innovation comes in many forms. Reynolds watched as the council chambers displayed a hologram of the Hyperion's last moments. The impossible speed, the final impact, the release of energy that had not only destroyed the Vraxen superweapon, but had fundamentally changed galactic warfare forever. At the newly established Space Force Academy on Earth, a simple equation was engraved above the main entrance. F equals ma. Below it, Foster's final transmission had been preserved. Sometimes victory requires sacrifice. Dr. Brooks's equations had been incorporated into a new field of study, kinetic warfare theory. Her calculations, once dismissed as unnecessarily basic, were now required reading for every military officer in the galaxy. Martinez stood to address the council, holding a data crystal. Captain Foster left this message to be played today. She recorded it hours before. He paused, composing himself. Before their final mission, the hologram flickered to life, showing Foster in her command chair. If you're seeing this, the Hyperion has completed her final mission. We built her to protect humanity, but in the end, she protected something greater. The principle that no species has the right to threaten innocent lives. The image smiled. To those who called us primitive, you weren't entirely wrong. We did go back to basics, but sometimes the old ways still work best. To those who will follow us, remember that technology without wisdom is just complexity without purpose. Chief Davidson's modifications to the fusion core had revolutionized propulsion theory. His primitive designs were now being studied across the galaxy, proving that sometimes the simplest solution was hiding behind layers of unnecessary advancement. Thompson's last communications protocols, designed to maintain signals at relativistic speeds, had become the new standard for deep space transmissions. O'Brien's final navigation calculations were being taught in every fleet academy. The Hyperion was more than a ship, Hayes concluded. She was proof that innovation doesn't always mean moving forward. Sometimes it means remembering where we came from and what we're fighting for. Reynolds approached the podium, carrying a small box. The last piece of data we received from the Hyperion included designs for a new class of vessel. Not weapons, but ships designed to explore, to push the boundaries of known space. Captain Foster called it the Guardian class. Its mission isn't to wage war, but to prevent it, by reminding everyone that the simplest solutions are often the most effective. The council chamber's main display showed the new ships under construction, vessels that combine the best of every species' technology with the fundamental principles the Hyperion had demonstrated so effectively. The Hyperion taught us that true strength isn't found in the complexity of our weapons, Martine said, standing beside Reynolds. It's found in the courage to use what we know in ways no one expected. As the ceremony concluded, Reynolds looked out at the assembled delegates. The galaxy had changed. Species that once competed to build the most advanced weapons now work together, remembering that sometimes the oldest laws of physics, of courage, of sacrifice were still the most powerful. Above Earth, the first Guardian-class ship prepared for launch. On its hull, beneath the registry number, a simple phrase was painted. Remember the Hyperion. The future had arrived, built on the foundations of the past.